Thanks for being here, and I'd like to thank the conference organizers for having us. We do have one of our panel members missing, Charles Watkinson. I'm sure most of you know. I'm sure he's been waylaid by fans along the way, so we are going to have him join us when he's available, but we want to start on time so we can get through the presentation and have a lot of time for questions. So to start by way of introductions, my name is Kathleen Riegelhaupt. I am the Director of e-reading at the New York Public Library, and I am the co-lead on a Backlist project that we've been working on, and I would like to turn it over to Greg Cram.
Hi, I'm Greg Cram. I'm the Associate General Counsel and Director of Information Policy at the New York Public Library, and with Kathleen, I'm co-leading this project.
And I am Aurora Bell. I am Associate Editorial Director at University of South Carolina Press, one of the publishers that's been part of the pilot phase of this program.
So today, we're going to start the presentation. Greg and I are going to speak about the incentives that the library had to start this project and our experience in the first 2 years of the proof of concept phase. Aurora and Charles are going to speak about their experiences and their motivations for participating. We're going to share some of the lessons we've learned over the past 2 years, and then speak about some areas where we think there could be collaboration or further work in the field that are related to this project. So just to start, I think it's interesting to think about why the New York Public Library joined this project, participated in this project. We were motivated to do so because we wanted to continue what we've done since our founding over 100 years ago, but we wanted to do it in digital formats. We curate collections of digital books that align with our historic collection strengths, but we also respond to patron needs and requests. So we know that if we're going to do this in digital formats, there's two things we need. We need the book in a digital format, a digital file, but we also need to have the confidence that we have the right to serve that work digitally. So on the latter, we encounter three scenarios when we're looking to serve a work digitally through the library. If a book is for sale or licensable, we acquire that according to our, hi Charles, come join us. We haven't gotten to your part yet. So if a book is available for license or sale, we can buy it according to our acquisition policies and our budgets. If we can provide free access via a public domain or open access title, we do that oftentimes through our digital research books platform. Now, the third category is where we often hit a dead end, and those are out-of-print books that are still in copyright, and that's the focus of this project. And these are what Charles has started to call the missing middle, and that's what we're trying to unlock and revive.
So we know that this missing middle, this black hole in availability of books published between 1920s, give or take, and 1990s, isn't there because authors stopped writing or publishers stopped publishing. It's because of copyright law. And I'm the copyright nerd, so that's why I'm co-lead on the project. And that's because copyright lasts a really long time, usually exceeding the commercial life of a scholarly book. This black hole is reflected in what we can lawfully make available to our patrons online and available in full text. But books published during this time period are really problematic from us from a copyright standpoint and from a motivation standpoint. The main problem is that the books aren't making money for people today, but they might make money for someone in the future. So how do we solve this problem of making backlist books available? Our institution charged us with going to find a solution, an unenviable task, because everyone who so far has tried this has failed and failed miserably. So how do we solve this problem? So as I said, failure is not an unlikely result in this space. We've had our own failure. We tried in 2018. Our plan was to target older books where the rights had surely reverted back to the authors and their heirs. So we called a bunch of authors and heirs and offered a set of incentives. We said we would digitize the books, we would engage a distributor, we would make it as easy as clicking a box to make their book available in digital marketplaces all over the world instantly. In exchange, my library, the NYPL, would get a license to make that digitized book available to our patrons. We called a bunch of authors, and while they were excited by the prospect of having their book read again, they kept stopping short of signing the agreement because they weren't sure they could guarantee the right to grant the library a license. None of them had copies of the original publication agreements, and no one knew whether the rights had actually reverted or not. Publishers weren't able to help us clear this up either. Many didn't have the resources to devote to finding old agreements. By the end of this project, we had signed up only a handful of authors and cleared only a handful of books. It wasn't a success. And we sat with this failure for a long time. And then the pandemic came, and during the pandemic, we kept coming back to a solution that had been proposed years ago that we thought might be worth revisiting. And in 2008, the Google proposed a solution to their problems in the form of a settlement agreement to end years of litigation. And there were lots of problems with the settlement agreements, like many problems with the settlement agreements. That's why the court said no. But there was this nugget in that proposed settlement agreement that would allow Google, the authors and publishers, to reach an understanding, reach a common goal here. And we thought that idea was worth revisiting. And the beauty of this little nugget was that the publishers and authors would not have to go through and pull every single contract they've ever published. Authors wouldn't go have to find contracts. And it was really straightforward about how this would work. Google would receive blanket permission from both the authors and the publishers to make books available. And this idea, informed by what we've learned from our failure and from the failure of others, led us to restart this work 2 years ago.
So we've started that work, what we started calling the University Press Backlist Project. I will just say with a caveat, we now know that the word backlist is not a universally shared one, so take it with a grain of salt. But it's a project that we started with Charles and Aurora and some other publishing partners, and we wanted to develop a proof of concept. So we are going to both publishers and authors to ask them to grant permission for the library to make their books available online to the world. So with presses, we're asking for their entire backlist or whatever they feel comfortable making available in this way. We know that a lot of presses have already done some of this work, often with vendors to digitize and make available backlist titles, but we know that even these efforts aren't comprehensive. They only allowed presses to digitize and monetize those works that they knew that they had the right to serve. For the remaining titles, and we've talked to some large presses, and there are thousands of them, that they weren't certain about the rights, those rights stats were unclear, those works remain in the dark. So our project accounts for this scenario. We've removed the needs for presses to find and determine the rights for all of their publishing agreements because we're also approaching the authors and their heirs. So the idea is that if we have both the publisher and the author or the heirs agreement, the true rights owner is likely one of the two. So I will also say we've, in talking to presses and doing this work, have learned that there's other scenarios. Some cases, presses know that they own the rights to the work, but they would never republish it. One press in particular, they own the rights to works they would never republish. They were published during the Jim Crow era. They are not works they would ever seek to put on the marketplace again, but they recognize the research value of the work to understand the era in which they were published. They wanted the works digitized. They wanted them preserved and available via a library, so those ones became eligible as part of this project. So you may be asking yourself, this seems like a lot of trouble and expense. Why are we bothering to do this work? Well, as we mentioned at the start of the presentation, we want to continue our mission to provide equitable access to anyone who seeks out a book. So for over a century, we've done that by buying books, working to make books available through interlibrary loan. We have partnerships like Recap and Marley and a lot of these other ones that you're familiar with. But we really want to be the most accessible public library in the world. And we know that patrons expect, and we know that some patrons rely exclusively on digital copies of works. Equity is no longer that we would make a book available in our reading rooms in Manhattan. We know that patrons don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have either of those things to come to New York and do this. So if we are going to be an equitable institution, we have got to make these works available digitally. We want to encourage deep research, and we know that when a work is not available in full text digitally, it's effectively invisible to a lot of researchers. We are also looking to build a more efficient service model. Within copyright law, we can scan certain pages of a book and send it to a researcher, but because of copyright law, every time we do that, we delete the file, and if someone requests the same pages, we have to scan them again, which is takes time for a researcher, it takes our time and resources. And we've also been experimenting with the idea of digital preservation of digital copies of books, even if we have the print copy. We've heard from publishers that they rely on libraries to preserve their works. We know that as presses merge or change ownerships, even shut down, we have a responsibility to keep these works and make them available.
So we have colleagues here to speak to their motivations and experiences with our project, but from our perspective, we think that we're offering a value proposition for some or all of a press's backlist. In short, knowing that presses have been told that there is surely some hidden gold in their backlist buried somewhere back there, we're offering to be the metal detector. In exchange for allowing us to post their books online, NYPL is providing circulation counts back to the presses. If a book finds renewed life and becomes commercially viable again, this is that the books are worth something, but we just don't know what yet. NYPL is going to withdraw the title from public access once a commercial license is offered to libraries. If a press has not yet digitized their title, we'll work with Google to scan the title at no cost to the press, or we'll try to find another solution that's financially viable. What we've learned from authors, the stakeholders who aren't on stage with us today, is that academic authors have a strong interest in making their intellectual work digitally available. For our proof of concept, we engaged the Authors Guild to help us find authors or their heirs and let them know about the project. We've reached out to over 300 authors to date so far, 154 of whom have agreed to make their books available through the library and have signed contracts. There's another 36 or so that have been unresponsive, and there's lots of others that are in the process of being cleared. But the most relevant statistic from my standpoint is that we've only been denied by 3 authors, one of whom declined us because the title was being republished, and so that presented a complication. One heir declined due to the uncertainty about rights ownership. They just weren't sure whether they were the right person. And then one author declined because he was disappointed that NYPL didn't have a print copy of his book in our catalog. So 3 out of 300, I'll take that every day. So several authors actually went above and beyond. They offered us licenses to books that we weren't contacting them about. They said, you want a license to this book? We'll give you a license to every book that I've published or my mother's published. What that tells us is that authors are supportive of this work and they want their books to be read again. So by making this mutually beneficial to all of the stakeholders involved, our hope is that we will succeed where others have failed. So if you're at an institution with a press that might be amenable to this project, come find us, come chat with us, tweet us, X us, I don't know, whatever it is, come find us. We'd love to speak with you. So over to Aurora to tell us more about this from a publisher's perspective.
Thank you. So thinking about University of South Carolina Press as a small press case study within this project, our publishing goes back to 1945. I would say that there are a handful of books from 1945 to 1990 that remain in print. Others, for the most part, rights have reverted to the authors. But there's this period for us from 1990 to 2012 where the books were not made available as ebooks when they were first published. So this is parallel to, but a little bit different from the category of books that Greg identified. But when we started talking about the project, for us, these titles from 1990 to 2012 are really the ones that are most interesting. During the period from 2012 when we started publishing ebooks up until about 2022, we worked to digitize a lot of our backlist ourselves. And that takes a lot of direct costs and also overhead. A lot of these books do not have files available, so we're literally pulling physical books from our warehouse to scan and sometimes to OCR them to make the ebook available. And so there's a lot of books for which the income that we would derive from licensing with aggregators or with individual copy sales was just not going to cover the cost of making them available. And now the funds that we were using for that project were redirecting towards accessibility remediation for the best-selling and most course-adopted works in that period of the backlist, or even more recent backlist. So for us, the titles that we could not handle ourselves are very interesting for this project. Another category that has come up more recently is books mostly from this period, that are coming up for reprint. And these are books that have been selling at a rate of just a few copies per year. And in some cases, we can pretty easily put those into a print-on-demand program and keep them available with almost no noticeable difference to the end user. But for a lot of these titles, again, we do not actually have files, and therefore the cost of getting files that we could even put into a print-on-demand program is not going to make sense when the book is only selling a couple of copies per year. So those are books also that are becoming very interesting to us for this project. That would be more of a case-by-case situation where we would say to the author, as much as we want to keep your book in print, we can't do that in a financially viable way. We'd like to revert the rights to you. But if you'd like to make it available electronically, we have this great partner who has the capacity to do it. So that's a new area that we're thinking a lot about. In terms of some of the challenges that we have faced with this project, the big thing is the metadata. It's really uneven. Part of this is on the right side. For at least the pilot phase of the project, we wanted to know what the various kinds of rights situations were that we were putting in front of NYPL. Even though they are agreeing to reach out to the authors and other rights holders, we still wanted to know what was really in these things. And a lot of those contracts, well, the contracts are digitized, but the third-party rights are not digitized. And so that just takes a lot of legwork to figure out. If there is nothing written in our database in that rights category, it's not because it's okay to use, it's because no one ever put the information in there. So we deal with that issue. And then also metadata matching issues. When we pull a list of any category of books that do not have ebooks commercially available, and NYPL pulls a list of the books that are in their catalog that are from South Carolina, matching those titles is a lot more difficult than you would think. If we were all data scientists, it would probably be fine, but we're a team of 11, and my Excel knowledge, is like low intermediate. So that's what we're working with. And I think that's true for a lot of publishers of small and medium size. So that's been a challenge as well. And then also on the legal side of things, just the fact that we're a state agency, our contracts are super complicated. I'm sure a lot of folks here have similar issues. And then thinking about what it means to have Google specifically as the scanning partner, and what protections they're agreeing to, and those kinds of things. So those are some of the challenges, but we have had one really neat creative solution, which is that Charles connected us with the University of Michigan School of Information, which has an alternative spring break program for their students. So they sent a student to us this past year and also in 2023, as well as one student to University of Massachusetts Press. And these students are master's students who have been studying IP and a little bit about contracts in scholarly publishing. And so for us, we have these students who can work in a really concentrated way for a couple of days and have a great baseline knowledge for the kind of work that we need. And they're getting to see a real world application of what they've been learning in the classroom. So that's something that we would look to expand to our own School of Information and library science program, as well as potentially to law students who are studying contract law. And with that, I'll turn it over to Charles.
Thank you very much. At the time, thank you. Perfect. At the time that we got to talk to Kathleen and Greg, I was the president of the Association of University Presses, and Aurora was the co-chair of the IP and Copyright Committee. And what was really appealing is that the association is an association of about 100 university presses. It's got other publishers in it too. And half of those are small presses. And so those are publishers who have total revenue every year of under 1.5 million. In fact, in most cases, under $750,000 a year. And those presses are forgotten. So in previous backlist digitization type projects, you either have presses that are very large, like MIT or Princeton, who have the staff, etc., to invest in this work, or you have collaborations between non-collaborations between libraries and publishers that are based on the idea that there's an oppositional logic to this, that basically the publishers are not going to be interested and libraries have to find ways round the publishers. So what was really attractive about this project was the recognition that things were complicated for smaller publishers, and also the recognition that the smaller publishers, who tend to be the less commercially motivated publishers just trying to get by, actually wanted to make their stuff available. And that's what's really special about this. And NYPL is a very good partner for that because we trust NYPL. I mean, to be honest, publishers wouldn't trust the Internet Archive. We view that as a Silicon Valley operation. We view the NYPL as in this for the long term, a trusted public library. So that was really important to us, that sense of trust from the start. So in the structure of AU presses, we're a medium-sized press at University of Michigan Press. We're not the largest by any means. We're not a Group 4 press like Harvard or Yale or Princeton or MIT, but we're in a category below, slightly bigger than Aurora's press. And our problem was that the technology is not a problem. We had digitized a whole lot of materials, actually in collaboration with our library, back in 2012. The problem was getting to the rights issues, because, the contracts were never envisaging these kinds of uses, and the work to analyze the contracts was very, very tricky. Also, actually, we hadn't got materials well described at all. So that's something I'm going to get to in a moment. What we had been able to do is, as a slightly larger publisher, we'd been able to focus on what we'd call the mid-list or the early backlist. I know it's a difficult term, but basically the things that we knew were marketable. And we created, in fact, our University of Michigan Press eBook collection. So we got to about 1,500 of these books. It was the other 2,000 scans that we really wanted to focus on. Could I have the next slide, please? And just to say, those sort of mid-list, those marketable backlist, there are a number of solutions for publishers who don't create their own. There's JSTOR, there's De Gruyter, the De Gruyter backlist project. There are a number of opportunities for those sort of things where we know the rights. It is, as Greg and Kathleen said, it's the middle, it's the other books that aren't really, really old, but they're in this intermediate period where they're still covered by copyright. That's a problem. So our big challenge that was really surprising to me was just how hard it was to get accurate bibliographic description for those works, let alone the rights issues. We're part of University of Michigan Library. The University of Michigan Library catalog records for these materials are not good. The NYPL catalog records for these materials are not good. We tried merging things together, and there's a lot of inaccuracy and a lot of missing gaps. So quite before thinking about all the copyright and rights and et cetera issues, we actually had to clean up the metadata. And so really having some help with that was really good, but that's still a lot of work. So it's remarkable to me that we have such bad data about these older books. The second thing which we are wrestling with is, we're going to be making these works available in the market. They may not be sold, they may be open access, but they're still available. And as a public institution, both as public institutions, we are covered by the ADA Title II legislation, and so we have to really think about accessibility. Also, if we try and sell these or include them as part of our collection, we're covered by the European Accessibility Act. So these, which specifically mentions ebooks. So how we are actually going to make these scanned PDFs accessible to a level that is acceptable is now our big challenge. And one of the things that's exciting is to think about the collaboration opportunities there. Aurora mentioned this creative program started by my colleague Jeremy York, who's at the conference, who teaches in the School of Information. And Aurora and our colleague Mary Doherty at UMass Press were generous hosts there. But the creative solution that we've had a student working on is creating descriptions for these older books, therefore kind of populating the missing metadata data using ChatGPT. So it's, you feed the OCR in, it creates a description, you have a human check it. So that is what I had to say. I just wanted to show one other thing, if we could forward that. Sorry. So the first project actually that's gone live with NYPL, NYPL has done this amazing work of digitizing the copyright records of the Copyright Office. And that allows machine querying of what is out of in public domain. And we found a whole bunch, 400 of our books that we hadn't really thought about. So not books, the most crucial thing is not the pre-1928, 1929 books, but it's the ones that we had forgotten to renew the copyright of. So now we've made all 410 books public domain with a CC0 license. And we're making those available as a block to anybody who's interested in using them for AI training in your institution. So if anybody's interested in having a block of 410 books, we'll just come and ask us. And then there's a description written by ChatGPT, and these are back again in availability, citable, downloadable, etc. And of course, these are also on the NYPL e-research site. And I think we have one more bit here.
So yeah, I did want to just cover kind of lessons learned. I think we've been sharing them throughout the presentation. I will just say that, you know, as Aurora Charles mentioned, we shared the metadata challenges. We sent, you know, kind of templates for the information we would need in order to feel confident that we were digitizing and sharing the same books that the presses were giving us permission to share. Even with that baseline metadata, it was a challenge, and we were surprised by that. So I think even if you are not participating in this specific project, understanding that good bibliographic metadata is going to make all of our lives easier, that was one of the lessons that we've taken away from this. We also took on the challenge about what kind of data should we share about use. We've said that we knew it was of value to the presses to understand how these works were being accessed and used. We wanted to share that information back in a useful way. So at the press's request, we've adopted Counter 5 standards for reporting data back to the presses about their books and how they're being used via the library. And I think one of the big lessons and challenges we've learned is that, you know, as many challenges and categories of rights there are equal, if not more, categories of digital copies of books. If the presses have digitized the work themselves or have a digital file, they've shared that with us, which is great. Some of these books have already been digitized by Google. If they've been scanned from our collections, that's an easy thing for us to secure that file. If they've been digitized from another library or institution, we've had more challenges in getting copies of those files, even with the rights holder and Google's permission. If the book has never been digitized, we can pull it from our shelves. We're building a network of partner libraries who we can pull from their shelves, and Google will digitize those books for free, and we can share that digital file back with the publishers to use as they see fit. But we know that that comes with challenges. Aurora mentioned that there is sometimes a question of working with Google or other big tech firms. We know that there's questions about AI. So those are questions that we're going to continue to tackle and try to work with, understand the issues at hand, and build a comprehensive catalog of digital books. And then in terms of collaboration, we think this is the right forum to share those areas where we think are adjacent to this work. We know we can't do all of this, but between publishers, libraries, and vendors, we think that there's a lot of work that could be done to support this project or other initiatives to make these works available. I think Charles came up with these three big buckets of where we think there's work to be done. Accessibility is first, and we've heard that from everyone involved. These works need to be accessible, and I think we've made really good strides. One area that's a big challenge is image description. It's these third-party rights, whether it's the descriptions themselves. We think there may be a case for AI in this work too. We know some projects are starting to do this work. We're really excited to see how that moves forward and how we can use this in that work. We know that we need to improve discoverability. We are going to improve metadata. The more standards we have for metadata that's shared between libraries and publishers, the better. And we are also working with our partner libraries to understand how we can include links in their research catalogs to any full text works we can make available through the library to just make that trip for a researcher even easier. And finally, we recognize that we have shared responsibility for, and we want to really collaborate deliberately to digitally preserve these works. So we welcome your thoughts, your questions, your collaboration. There is a microphone available, and because this session is being recorded, I would just say any questions you have, please do speak into the microphone. So thank you.
Where is the microphone?
Right in the back.
Oh, okay.
Three questions?
Okay, sure, I'll go first.